I'm sorry, Leanie, but this salary is indefensible. That's what Nathan Briggs, our new CFO, said, projecting my pay onto a boardroom screen like I was a problem waiting to be solved. 19 people sat around that table while he compressed 15 years of my work into a sterile label that read administrative coordination. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't feel tears threaten. What I felt instead was understanding, not his, but mine. He had just violated the one unspoken rule that keeps companies breathing. You never humiliate the person who built your revenue. For 15 years, Iron Veil Manufacturing had been more than a job to me. It was the rhythm of my life. When I joined, the company was wobbling through a painful evolution, shedding its industrial fabrication roots in favor of aerospace contracts that demanded precision, trust, and endurance. I wasn't brought in for prestige. I was hired because the mess scared everyone else. Client relationships stretched across defense contractors, specialty suppliers, and obscure manufacturers whose components no one noticed unless something failed. I became the connective tissue between engineering reality and financial promises. Every agreement passed through my hands. Every late-night phone call from a client staring down a shutdown landed on my desk. I became the constant in an organization that churned through leadership like it was seasonal. 6 CEOs, 4 strategic reinventions, countless initiatives designed to fix problems no one fully understood. My title read Senior Director of Strategic Client Partnerships. In practice, I was Iron Veil's memory. I knew which clients demanded face-to-face reassurance before approving an order. I knew who would panic at the word delay and who just needed context. They didn't purchase components from us, they purchased confidence, and I was the one delivering it. The work was invisible, exhausting, and rarely acknowledged. Flights booked at midnight, contracts reviewed in hotel rooms, spreadsheets refined until dawn. But I watched the company grow anyway, from a regional name to a national force. Last year, we crossed $500 million in annual contracts. I didn't toast to it. I was already mapping renewals for the next quarter. Somewhere along the way, leadership stopped remembering how those numbers came to exist. Metrics replaced people. Trust became a line item. When the new executive team arrived with polished language about alignment and synergy, I recognized the choreography. New leaders always believe whatever they don't understand can be optimized away. Nathan Briggs was the embodiment of that belief. Fresh from a consulting firm known for slash-and-burn turnarounds, he spoke proudly about fixing organizations from the inside out. In his first week, he announced that compensation models were misaligned with market benchmarks. I heard what he meant. We're paying too much to the people who actually hold this place together. I wasn't intimidated by numbers. I lived inside them. I knew my portfolio represented 42% of Iron Veil's total contracts. I assumed no one would be foolish enough to jeopardize that. Still, something about Nathan's confidence unsettled me. He walked the halls like ownership had already been transferred, charts in hand, speeches rehearsed. By week 3, the atmosphere shifted. Anonymous spreadsheets circulated, salary comparisons appeared out of nowhere, people whispered in corridors, recalculating their worth through rumor. Meetings became exercises in survival. Department heads nodded through his sermons on efficiency, HR handed over payroll data under the banner of transparency. I stayed still. I knew this wasn't about balance, it was about dominance. He wanted obedience disguised as logic. His internal newsletter arrived at Friday, filled with empty poetry about lean futures and recalibration. He never named me, but I knew when he wrote about above-market compensation structures serving as examples. I had become the lesson. The irony was painful. He had never sat in a single client review. He had never heard a client say they stayed because of me. Loyalty didn't translate cleanly into spreadsheets, and Nathan had no interest in learning the language. The reckoning came on a Thursday afternoon in late March during his quarterly leadership alignment session. The name alone should have warned me. I walked into the boardroom just before 3, coffee in hand, expecting another exercise in jargon. 19 executives sat around the polished table. The projector glowed at the front. Nathan stood there with rolled sleeves and borrowed confidence. When he clicked forward and my name filled the screen, something inside the room fractured. He called my compensation cost inflation. He spoke as if uncovering waste, not dismantling a person. I suggested quietly that this belonged in private. He smiled and called it transparency. He unveiled a revised package that stripped nearly half my pay, capped my bonus, erased my travel budget. Heads nodded, eyes avoided mine, and in that moment the shock burned away, replaced by clarity. This was theater, a warning dressed in reform. He chose me because history is expensive, and respect looks like vulnerability to men like him. I leaned forward slightly, my voice even, just to clarify that $120,000 represents less than 1/10 of the revenue I personally manage. An awkward ripple of silence moved through the room. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The damage was already done. I sat through the rest of the meeting numb, my body there, my mind already gone. When it ended, I walked out without speaking. I didn't return to my office right away. I stood in the hallway staring at framed photos of former leadership teams, men in suits who had come and gone, all convinced they were smarter than the people who built the place. That's when I knew something had shifted. Nathan believed he'd made an example of me. He had, just not the one he intended. When it was over, I didn't storm out or break down. I went back to my office, shut the door, and sat quietly long enough to hear the hum of the air conditioner. 15 years of loyalty erased in 20 minutes of corporate theater. On my desk sat a stack of client notes, handwritten thank yous, photos from plant visits, holiday cards. Each one reminded me my value wasn't on Nathan's spreadsheet. It lived in relationships that couldn't be measured. I opened my laptop and scrolled through my contacts, 127 clients, each a thread in the web I'd built. Then I opened another folder labeled Opportunities. Buried inside was an email from 8 months ago, Novodyne Aerospace. Their CEO, Miranda Holt, had reached out personally saying she admired my approach to long-term client strategy and wanted me to consider a senior leadership role. I'd declined out of loyalty to Iron Veil. Reading it now, I felt the clear difference between loyalty and servitude. There's a moment when humiliation stops hurting and starts sharpening your vision. Mine came at exactly 3:42 p.m. I drafted my resignation carefully, every word intentional. After careful consideration of today's compensation discussion, I am resigning from Iron Veil Manufacturing Systems effective immediately. I am grateful for the years of partnership and wish the company continued success in its efficiency initiatives. Polite, professional, final. I read it twice before sending it to Nathan and the executive team, CCing HR. The email left my outbox at 3:58 p.m., and something inside me finally exhaled. I packed quietly. Photos, one small award, a notebook of client notes I legally owned. No one stopped me. Most avoided my eyes. They understood the silence that follows a corporate execution. By 4:30, I was in my car, Houston's city lights beginning to shimmer through the windshield. My phone buzzed before I reached the freeway. I recognized the number. "Lainey, this is Miranda Hole. I heard what happened. Tell me it's not true." "It's true," I said. "They called it market alignment." She paused, then said softly, "Then let's make sure you never hear that phrase again. Can you come in Monday morning?" I didn't hesitate. "I'll be there at 9. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, my resignation email still open on the screen. I didn't feel defeated. I felt detached, like watching the final scene of a movie I'd already outgrown. They thought they'd cut costs. They'd actually severed the artery feeding their business. I didn't plan revenge that night. I didn't need to. In industries built on trust, betrayal executes itself. By the time I got home that Friday evening, my resignation had already spread through the company faster than any official announcement. My phone lit up before I even stepped inside. The first message was from Daniel Cho, Iron Veil's vice president of contracts. "Lainey, did you really resign? Nathan's acting like it's nothing. Please tell me he's wrong." I didn't respond. The second call came from a client, Anderson Aerotech, one of our largest accounts. "Lainey, Tom Anderson said, his voice tight with disbelief. "I heard you're no longer with Iron Veil. Is that true?" I paused, then answered simply, "Yes, Tom, I resigned this afternoon." There was silence, then a sigh carrying 12 years of trust. "We've done business with you, not the company. If you're gone, I don't see how we stay." I reminded him gently, "Tom, I can't solicit clients under my contract." He let out a bitter chuckle. "You don't have to. I already know where I want to take my business." The call ended with a promise I hadn't asked for. It was the first domino. Within an hour, 5 more calls came in, each a variation of the same question. Where are you going next? These weren't transactional voices. They were people who had shared factory floors, last-minute crises, and after-hours problem-solving with me. By midnight, I had 17 unread messages, all from clients asking for confirmation, some already hinting at switching vendors. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to. Their reactions said everything about where loyalty actually lived. Saturday morning, I drove to a cafe and opened my laptop. News moved fast in manufacturing circles, and the whispers had already reached the industry boards. Senior Director Lainey Carter resigns from Iron Veil after compensation dispute, one post read. The comments underneath were ruthless. "Cost-cutting gone wrong," someone wrote. Another added, "They just handed Novodyne their future." I smiled at the precision. Nathan's efficiency initiative was already bleeding into public perception. By Sunday, the trickle became a flood. My LinkedIn post, simple and factual, read, "Grateful for 15 years of learning and growth at Iron Veil. Excited for new beginnings in aerospace partnerships." Within hours, it exploded. Colleagues commented, clients messaged, recruiters emailed. Some replies were subtle shows of support. Others openly called Iron Veil's decision corporate suicide. That night, I got a text from Miranda at Novodyne. "They're panicking. We've already had 3 Iron Veil clients ask about transferring contracts." I stared at the screen and realized the revenge had already started without me lifting a finger. Monday morning arrived like a storm front. My phone buzzed nonstop. Texts, missed calls, emails. One of them was from Nathan himself. "Lainey, we need to talk. Clients are reaching out with concerns. Please respond." I didn't. I was already sitting in Miranda's office at Novodyne signing paperwork for my new role as Chief Strategy Officer. She slid the contract toward me, her expression split between amusement and disbelief. "You've caused quite an earthquake, Lainey," she said. "Iron Veil's board called an emergency meeting this morning." I signed, my hand steady. "I didn't cause anything," I said. "They did." That afternoon, screenshots started coming in from former colleagues, formal termination notices from Iron Veil's biggest clients. Each cited relationship discontinuity as the reason. 9 by noon, 12 by evening, everyone represented millions in revenue. Iron Veil's phones must have been ringing off the hook. That night, Nathan called again. His voicemail was shorter this time. "If you're intentionally coordinating this, we'll take legal action." I listened twice, then deleted it. I hadn't broken a single rule. I hadn't called anyone, sent an email, or encouraged anything. I had simply left, and the clients had chosen who they trusted. Trust, it turns out, doesn't obey non-compete clauses. By the end of the day, Iron Veil's cost alignment turned into a client exodus worth over $100 million, and that was just day 1. By Tuesday morning, the damage was already visible in numbers that made Nathan's salary charts look like jokes. Iron Veil had lost nearly $180 million in contracts within 48 hours. I didn't need confirmation. Former colleagues kept sending updates in disbelief. "It's chaos here," one message read. "They've set up a crisis task force." I imagined Nathan pacing the same boardroom where he'd called me overpaid, still clutching his slides while the company bled revenue faster than he could explain it. At Novodyne, my onboarding was swift and purposeful. Miranda skipped speeches.
"We'll stabilize relationships first," she said, handing me a list of clients who'd reached out on their own. Most of the names were familiar: Anderson Aerotech, Deltamac, Crown Systems, all former Iron Veil partners. Each contract carried years of trust, built over time, not quarters. When I called them, they didn't need convincing. "Lainey, we just want to work with people who know what they're doing," one CEO told me bluntly. "You've never let us down." I didn't celebrate. I went straight to work. Within a week, my small team had secured commitments from 16 companies, totaling nearly $200 million in new business. Novodyne's leadership was stunned.
I wasn't. This is what happens when loyalty has a face. Meanwhile, the headlines spread beyond industry circles. Iron Veil faces client retention crisis following executive departure. The articles quoted unnamed insiders describing panic and collapsing client confidence. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan had wanted transparency. He was getting it, just not the kind he could manage. By week's end, the numbers spoke for themselves. 22 contracts gone, operations unraveling, emergency layoffs looming. I didn't post, I didn't comment, I let silence do the work. The louder Nathan defended his decision publicly, the worse it sounded. "We're undergoing strategic optimization," he said in one interview, his voice tight. The market heard collapse at Novodyne. Miranda and I watched the broadcast from her office. She shook her head. "He still doesn't understand, does he?" "No," I said. "He thinks revenue follows titles. It follows trust." The next Monday, a formal letter arrived from Iron Veil's legal department, accusing me of violating my non-compete through indirect client influence. I almost laughed. My lawyer replied with one sentence: "Our client has not solicited anyone. Iron Veil's former clients appear to have made independent business decisions." That ended it. Nathan called later that day. His voice had changed. No arrogance, no performance, just fear. "Lainey, please, we need your help transitioning these accounts. We're losing control." I answered calmly, "Nathan, you made it clear I was overpaid. I'm sure the person you hired at market rate can handle it." He tried reason, emotion, guilt, but there was nothing left to save. The company that reduced me to a line item was now watching its bottom line evaporate. By quarter's end, Iron Veil's revenue was down 47%. Layoffs followed. Entire teams dismantled to absorb the damage. Nathan disappeared from public view after the board removed him in an emergency session. When the news broke, I felt no triumph, just a quiet calm. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I had simply walked away, and the absence of what I built did the rest. Revenge without touching a thing. That's the cleanest kind there is. Iron Veil didn't survive the year. 3 months after Nathan's presentation, the company was quietly acquired at less than half its previous valuation. The official statement blamed unexpected market conditions, but everyone in the industry knew the truth. When you humiliate the person holding your relationships together, you don't just lose talent, you lose trust. I didn't watch their downfall with satisfaction. It felt like watching a slow-motion crash I'd already escaped. By then, I was at Novodyne, in an office overlooking downtown Houston, leading a team that understood what partnership meant. The irony was sharp. Iron Veil once tried to cut my pay to save $100,000. They ended up losing hundreds of millions trying to prove loyalty could be replaced by spreadsheets. Novodyne thrived. Within 6 months, I rebuilt a portfolio stronger than the one I'd left behind. 43 clients, many former Iron Veil partners who moved on pure trust that working with me meant stability. Miranda gave me full autonomy, trusting the instinct Iron Veil dismissed as emotional management. It wasn't emotional, it was relational. In aerospace manufacturing, one missed shipment can cost millions. People don't trust systems, they trust the person who answers the phone when everything goes wrong. The first time I walked into a client review meeting at Novodyne, one of them smiled and said, "Glad you're back, Lainey. It finally feels like we're dealing with adults again." That meant more to me than any award I'd ever received.
Over the next year, Novadine's growth rate doubled. We reached milestones Ironvale had once labeled impossible. Then, 18 months after my resignation, Harvard Business Review published a case study titled The $20,000 Cost Cut That Destroyed $400 million in Revenue. It used Ironvale as a cautionary tale of how market alignment thinking can annihilate relationship-driven businesses. My name wasn't in the headline, but it didn't need to be. The people who mattered already knew. A framed copy of the article sits on my desk today, not out of pride, but as a reminder of what arrogance costs. I kept one other relic from my Ironvale years, a photo of that boardroom screen with my salary projected in red letters. It hangs beside my Novadine leadership plaque. Every time I look at it, I remember the silence in that room, the stares, the humiliation. Then I remembered what followed: the calls, the clients, the quiet revenge that didn't require a single word. Sometimes power isn't loud, it's quiet, patient, and absolute. People ask me now what I learned from it all. I tell them this: if a company ever calls you overpaid, don't argue. Just let them discover what your absence really costs. Because one day, the same people who undervalued you will rewrite their own downfall into a lesson they paid dearly to learn. When I look back, what happened at Ironvale wasn't just corporate drama. It was a lesson in value, dignity, and silence. For years, I believed loyalty was its own reward, that if I worked hard enough, people would recognize my worth. But in the end, it took humiliation for me to understand something essential. You can't stay loyal to people who treat your devotion like a discount. When Nathan called me overpaid, I realized some leaders confuse cost with worth, and that staying silent in the wrong place isn't humility, it's surrender. Walking away wasn't about revenge at first. It was about reclaiming what was mine, my self-respect, my expertise, my peace. But life has a way of balancing scales without you lifting a hand. When Ironvale collapsed under the weight of its arrogance, it wasn't my victory, it was their lesson. I didn't destroy them. They did that the moment they mistook a person for an expense. The real win wasn't the contracts that followed me. It was waking up without resentment, knowing I didn't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes forgiveness is self-liberation, but sometimes silence is the sharpest knife. It cuts through noise, ego, and power games more effectively than any argument ever could. The lesson I took from it all goes far beyond boardrooms. Whether it's your job, your friendships, or your marriage, never stay where your worth has to be defended more than it's recognized. Loyalty is honorable, but it should never cost you your voice. The people meant to stay in your life will never make you beg them to see your value. They'll simply know. If you want to start today, write down 3 places or relationships where you feel unseen or undervalued. Ask yourself, if you left tomorrow, what would actually collapse without you? That's where your leverage lives. Start setting quiet boundaries. You don't need to announce them, just stop apologizing for your worth. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about your own turning point, and subscribe to hear more stories where silence speaks louder than revenge.